Fashion can make you feel bad. Some of the things that people do today are wear unsafe high heels, cram themselves into shapewear, and pull out hair that they don't want. You've at least worn uncomfortable shoes or an itchy sweater for a day, even if you don't want to change your whole body to fit someone else's idea of beauty. Thank goodness none of us have to live in the crazy Victorian age, especially the crazy fashion world of that time. The reason for this is that some Victorian clothes were meant to kill you. Clothing from this time was very dangerous, with arsenic in the fabric and designs on the socks that would burn into your skin. Workers in factories had to be extra careful around dangerous chemicals and very dangerous tools for making things. According to the BBC, the Victorian era was also known for its many reform groups, which is good news. One of these was making sure factory workers had more rights. Another was the Rational Dress Society, which pushed for smart clothing options for women that weren't limited to corsets and crinolines. Think about that the next time you feel bad about buying shoes that are too small. It could have been much, much worse. You shouldn't have to worry about your shoes killing you at the next party. Some Victorian fabric was full of arsenic. Scientists and makers worked together in the Victorian era to make synthetic dyes that made cheap, beautiful fabric with bright colours. Now, even people who were just starting to get into the middle class could buy brightly coloured clothes, wallpaper, and other textiles that made the home feel more alive. It's too bad it was killing everyone. That might be too strong for some colours, but the arsenic century says that one shade of green really did kill people. This bright colour, called Sheely's green, was made by mixing copper and arsenic trioxide. For businesses that use the colour often for dyeing, making silk flowers, or even decorating cakes, this could be very bad. Open spots appeared on their skin, they threw up a lot, and they had painful headaches and low iron levels. People who stayed home and didn't work found out that something as harmless as their green wallpaper had made them sick. Matilda Scheurer, a British low-level silk flower maker, died after being exposed to this shade of green. Jezebel said that her painful death made her eyes and toenails turn green. By the time she died in 1861, campaigners knew how dangerous arsenic was and were trying to get people to stop using it. It took years for the British government to publicly ban the use of arsenic in dyes. Even after Scheurer's death got a lot of attention, and other European governments did the same. Tightly laced corsets had serious consequences for Victorian women. The corset was an important piece of women's clothing for a long time. Without one, women of all social levels would have been seen as almost naked. The clothes wrapped around a woman's body and were made of fabric reinforced first with whalebone and then with steel strips that were stronger and more rigid. The Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco say that the addition of metal holes to the assembly in 1828 was a big step forward in the history of the corset, even though the small metal pieces might not seem important at first. Because the holes were newer and stronger, corsets could hold more pressure than ever before. This made it possible for tight lacing, which is controversial and could be dangerous. A book called The Corset: A Cultural History says that as the 1800s went on, people wanted their waists to get smaller and smaller. Tight lacing was linked to this trend. As the time went on, fashion called for a more pronounced hourglass shape, which was achieved by having a maid or friend tighten the corset laces instead of pulling them tighter and tighter. Still, getting a very small waist had very bad effects on health. People who wore them had trouble taking full breaths because the garments squeezed their lungs. Some stomach muscles may have gotten weaker from too much use. Also, tight corsets seem to have affected digestion, causing stylish women to eat small meals and go to the bathroom in awkward ways. Victorian hats were loaded with mercury. Victorian men also put their health at risk and could even die in order to be trendy. It was even more dangerous for them if they were artists. The National Geographic says that felt hats were often made from beaver or rabbit fur. People who made hats brushed the fur with mercury to make it stick together and form felt. It was more than enough to do the job. Mercury is a very dangerous chemical. Over time, workers' teeth fell out, their hearts and lungs stopped working. and their thoughts began to fade. Being mad as a hatter, as the saying went, meant to become paranoid and painfully shy, like a hat maker who is high on mercury. People were safe because their hats had linings inside them. If you are exposed to mercury for a long time, it could cause neuromotor problems like shaking. Hartford history says that this problem was so well known in the town of Danbury, Connecticut, which was famous for making hats, that hat makers in the area were said to have come up with the Danbury shakes. After a lot of work by campaigners and the Danbury Hatters unions over many years, the state finally banned the use of mercury in 1941. Large skirts sucked Victorian women into factory machinery. During the most exciting times of the Industrial Revolution, safety at work was often not even thought of. The US Department of Labor said that things would get better in the end, and that stricter safety rules and labor reforms would be put in place by the end of the 1800s. But the road there was sometimes very bloody. For example, people who worked in cloth mills could breathe in dangerous amounts of linen and dust, and there was always the chance of getting sucked into machines that didn't have even the most basic guards or shields. It's clear that Victorian industries needed a lot of work before they could even be called remotely safe, but workers who cared about fashion also put themselves in danger. A site called Fashion Victims tells many stories of workers whose clothes put them in dangerous situations at work. During some parts of the time period, wearing big skirts with crinolines and hoops under them was in style. However, women were far too likely to get dragged into machines when their big clothes got too close to the moving parts. On the other hand, simple clothes might not be safe. In 1893, the Industrial Commission of Minnesota wrote about a number of different, sometimes horrifying events. One girl was lucky that her skirt was only torn off when it got caught in industrial sewing equipment. Some people weren't as lucky. Even Victorian shoe polish was ready to kill you. Yes, someone's bright green dress could drop enough arsenic to kill everyone at a party. That is, if those people suddenly decided to eat all the floor sweepings. Arsenic in fabrics could give seamstresses horrible sores, and mercury chemicals in fabrics could make hat makers shake and go crazy. But surely a simple shoe polish boy would be safe from the dangerous Victorian style. Of course not. Gizmodo says that the trend for shiny shoes could also kill people sometimes. A lot of finishes had nitrobenzene in them, which looked nice on shoes, but could also make people pass out. People were safe as long as they let the paint dry before touching it. On the other hand, people were in big trouble if they were anxious or often touched the wet polish. They might have major health problems like not getting enough oxygen, throwing up, or even dying in some cases. Some people who were poisoned by nitrobenzene said that drinking booze made their symptoms even worse. He put on his shoes while the polish was still wet because he was so excited to go to the party. He got polish on his feet and legs. He threw up and passed out after sitting back and drinking with his friends for a while. Later, the man's friend found him dead. He had been killed by a deadly mix of alcohol and nitrobenzene. Victorian skirts were massive fire hazards. While the Victorian age was still going on, the City University of New York says that the ideal woman was an obedient angel in the house. At that time, skirts made of open weave gauze, tarlatan and cotton muslin were seen as very light and airy, which went along with this idea. Racht says it's too bad that these airy fabrics could also turn women into terrible fires. An awful lot of the lights in this world came from candles and gas lamps. At parties, women in flowy dresses looked beautiful in the soft lighting. Cotton, on the other hand, is already a pretty flammable medium. On the other hand, those light fabrics and skirts with hoops let a lot of air flow under dresses, which could quickly spread a small fire to a larger one. Ozzy said that these terrible events happened a lot to ballet dancers. They danced in their long skirts next to the hot stage lights every night. It was possible for them to use chemicals that put out fires on their costumes, but the fabric went a dirty yellow. Some ballerinas skipped this step and danced in clothes that hadn't been changed. They then got too close to candles or lanterns, caught fire, and died painful, slow deaths. Some Victorian makeup could make your face disintegrate. During the 1800s, makeup was a pretty touchy topic. According to the Oxford student, Queen Victoria was very against the use of makeup. She said it was rude and vulgar because it was linked to sex workers. Another thing was that there was a big trend for natural beauty, which could be very harsh on people who had acne, freckles, or even a little sunburn. With the end of the 1800s, many people did start wearing makeup again, but it cost them. Arsenic and lead could be in face creams and other products. The cut says that lead-based cosmetics made skin very dry and caused serious abdominal pain before killing long-term users. They got bad advice even if they were determined to go au naturel when it came to makeup. Atlas Obscura says that advice writers like S.D. Powers said that acidic ammonia could be used to either make hair grow faster or, more confusingly, get rid of hair that you don't want. Powers said that mercury was the best thing for people who wanted bigger eyebrows. A woman might use drops with dangerous belladonna to make her eyes look bigger, but if they used too much of it, they could go blind. According to the Ugly Girl papers, even opium was suggested as a way to treat skin problems. However, readers would have known that it was dangerous, unless, as Powers writes, you could just take a bath to get off of. Victorian hairstyles could get you burned. People in the Victorian era often wanted their hair to look different from how it was. That was usually curly hair, which could look like anything from soft waves to frizzy little bangs hanging over someone's seemingly stylish face, according to the Victorian Lady's Guide to Fashion and Beauty. A lot of people used old-fashioned curling irons to get that look. These beauty tools were made of real iron and were often heated up by sitting them on top of hot coals. If they were left in the coals for too long and then carelessly put them on her hair, she might have woken up to the smell of burning hair and a big chunk of it in her hand instead of on her head. If a designer burned off a piece of her hair by accident, there were ways to fix it, but she might have wanted to take a moment before starting the treatments that were suggested. According to the Ugly Girl papers, some people said that ammonia could help it come back. It doesn't matter that ammonia can be very acidic and smells awful even when it is dampened properly. Author Mimi Matthews says that body hair was sometimes cleared with quicklime, which is very acidic. Aside from these, lye or even arsenic may also be found in depilatory creams. People who like to try new things could poke hair follicles with pins or even use an early and painful form of electrolysis to kill them. Victorian fashion carried creepy crawlies. A lot of people like to romanticize the Victorian era, daydreaming about the fancy clothes and polite way of life. But this fantasy often leaves out the less glamorous parts of life back then. For most people, living in the Victorian era was just gross. Some of their bodies might have been hidden by their clothes, but long skirts that trailed behind the user could also pick up some unwanted guests as they went about their daily lives. Fashion Victim says that soldiers who got sick on the battlefield showed that diseases like typhus and trench fever could be spread by lice and fleas living in someone's dirty clothes. Some clothes were so bad that they caused a woman, the daughter of Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel, to die of typhus. Her father had made her a riding habit out of fabric that a tailor had put over her husband while he was sick with typhus. It's not like Victorians didn't know any of this. Epidemiology for Public Health Practice says that by 1900, a lot of people thought that stylish skirts could bring diseases like typhoid fever and tuberculosis into the home. In some parts of the dress reform movement, fashion that improved health for both individuals and the public started to get more attention. Ripley's Believe It or Not says this led to some strange in-between solutions, such as a metal skirt lifter that let its user raise their skirts above the muck and still play sports like tennis. Socks gave some Victorians chemical burns. The Victorians loved colour so much, even though most pictures from that time are black and white, walking into a typical middle or upper class home during that time might have seemed like walking into a rainbow. Because of new dye methods, there were more saturated colours that wouldn't fade than ever before. It looks like people wanted to show off. However, some well-known socks showed that those new colours needed some work. The case of the poisonous socks says that people first heard about the socks in September 1868. That's when the London-based newspaper The Times told the public that a doctor had told cops that dyed socks were bad for your health. The orange dye in these pairs was made with a new kind of acid that gave plant workers sores all over their arms. People who were unfortunate enough to wear the socks could get so much swelling in one spot that a man had to have his boots cut off. An article from that time in the St. James's Magazine also warned that some dyes had arsenic in them, which was called a baneful ingredient because it could get past chemistry tests when mixed with other dye compounds. Gizmodo says that this problem didn't happen to everyone. Some people had no problems wearing the socks, but others got badly burned by the chemicals. It looks like the people who were hurt may have had more alkaline sweat, which mixed with alkaline colours and soaked into their skin. Tuberculosis became a fashion ideal for Victorian people. In a time when public health was not very well taken care of, making a terrible disease into a fashion icon was one of the strangest fashion trends of the Victorian era. Hyperallergic says that Charlotte Bronte wrote that it was a flattering malady, but it was really terrible. People who had tuberculosis had fevers, were hungry, and threw up blood and phlegm. But as more and more people forgot about the bloody coughs and diarrhea, tuberculosis became cool. Smithsonian magazine says that's because people who got sick also turned pale and sleepy. They also had big eyes that some people thought looked like they sparkled. People who were sick sometimes had rosy cheeks, which were not seen as the result of a dangerous fever, but as a beautiful rose blooming on top of thin skin. Since then, historians have linked famous Victorian clothes to this strange tendency to look like people who are dying. Women who tight-laced their corsets and waists to make them smaller and smaller may have been linked to the thin look of a person in the last stages of tuberculosis. It was also popular to have pale skin and pink cheeks and lips, which was sometimes helped by makeup. Combs could spontaneously combust on a Victorian dressing table. It's possible that there was a Victorian designer who tried very hard to do everything right. Because it was full of lead and arsenic and made your face fall apart, she didn't wear makeup. In any case, the Queen didn't like it. It was smart of her to wear ball dresses that wouldn't catch fire if she looked at a gas lamp. According to Ohio State University, the aesthetic dress movement was a push to get women to wear wider, more natural clothes that didn't need corsets that were too tight. She forgot to bring her comb, which was a shame. It caught fire while it was sitting on her desk in the sun for maybe 1 minute too long. Celluloid was the cause of the small fire. Smithsonian magazine says this early plastic was used instead of expensive wood to make combs and many other things, because it was popular and cheap. But celluloid is also very easy to catch on fire. People who bought things made from it said that they often caught fire without notice. Celluloid goods could even explode, like when 2 billiard balls hit each other and blow up in a big way. Making things was even worse. The Day says that in 1909, an explosion and fire in a Brooklyn comb mill killed 9 people.